Threshold says, when do I open? The range says, when the signal is closed, how much volume do you want me to actually remove? It doesn't have to fully mute it. This console defaults to knocking 56 dB of gain off. That's virtually muted. That doesn't, like I said, when I'm talking here, you don't hear that. Like, that's not happening. But I can play with that range. I can bring it up to the point where now I'm just knocking 10 dB off. So I can get it really loud. When I get quiet, it's still going to pass a little bit of noise, but not as much. So there's times when you just will want it to make it quieter and not fully kill the signal. But most of the time you want it to be pretty closed. Okay, then the next three are fun. These are all time-related parameters right here. This is attack, hold, and release. So between those three, I'm developing what I like to call, or what is called, like the envelope of sound of that whatever instrument or whatever it is that I'm gating. The attack is, think of it like a gate that I'm driving my car through. The attack is, once the car has hit the sensor that opens the gate, how quickly does the gate open? And so, or how long does it wait before it opens, really? And so, with the attack, that's right now it's set to 0. That's basically going to be instantaneous. As soon as the signal is above the threshold, it's going to pop that signal open. But sometimes, you actually want to intentionally delay that a little bit so that you can modify what of that sound that you hear. So again, toms are the perfect example. When I hit a tom, it's got, a stick hitting that plastic head of the tom, you get a nice sharp plastic sound on the front end of that, but then after that I hear the ring of that body of that drum. So a lot of times what I'll actually do is, if I'm getting too much of that plasticky attack sound, I'm just gonna delay my attack a little bit, slow the attack down, so that even though the attack is what opens the gate and lets the signal pass through, I'm not gonna hear as much of it. By slowing that attack down, I'm able to basically get past that sound before it actually opens, and then I'm just hearing more of the body of the drum rather than hearing the snap of the stick on that head and the body. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And then the hold is, once the signal has passed back below the threshold, how long does it wait before it starts closing? So how much time are we just gonna let it hang? And the release is, once it actually starts closing, how quickly do you want it to close? Do you want it to cinch down really, really fast, or do you want to be able to, so if you have a tom that's got a lot of body and you want to let it ring a little bit, you can stretch that hold and release time so that you get a nice wom, 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 wom that kind of sits there after they hit that tom, or you can go tighter if you want it to be wom, you know what I mean? So that's what those tools are. They're going to help you kind of tighten or loosen the parameters of that gate so that you hear what you want to hear out of that drum. So that's all that's the important stuff. There's some little things over here that I'm going to give you a very, very fast lesson on, because it's stuff that's a little more smaller use cases. The key, this is where I can, with the key, I can use a different channel to open the gate than this channel itself. Now, crazy situations when you want to use that. Sometimes, like I said, if I use 2 mics on the kick drum or 2 mics on the snare drum, if the snare drum opens, I want both mics to open. So sometimes, rather than using each microphone to open its own gate, I'll actually use one of the 2 microphones to open the gates for both of them. Mm-hmm. So if I'm doing the snare that way, I could use the bottom snare that's really going to tightly only pick up the snare and nothing else, and say only when that bottom snare gets signal do I want the top snare mic to open. I'm just choosing what signal I'm actually measuring against. So all the settings will be based around the threshold, really will be based around the incoming signal, but I'm still shaping the sound of the one I'm actually processing. Okay? You probably never use it, but it's good to know it's there. And then the last one, these are some filters where I can actually filter whether it's this normal, you're gonna see self-post EQ as the key is basically saying, I'm being opened by myself, this very channel, and measured at the post EQ position in the signal chain. But I can actually use what's either called a high pass filter, band pass filter, or low pass filter to say what frequencies do I want it to be triggered by. Rather than it being triggered by the full spectrum of that signal and any bit of that signal crossing that threshold, I can actually narrow it down. So again, toms are a perfect example. If I don't want the toms to open with the snare every time he hits it, I can actually band pass it so that it only listens to kind of the tone frequency that is emanated from that particular drum to open the gate, rather than the full spectrum. So that when he hits the snare, you're much less likely to get the tom to open because it doesn't hit the same frequency range that particular tom does. So you can actually use a band pass to basically tighten down and say only listen to these frequencies to open that gate. Okay? So that's a gate.
if we and I can see some things people, if we get to a point where we aren't sure for whatever you're getting here with, what are the default buttons? Does that reset it to what's recorded?
Literally console default. That's going to go back to the console's default setting for that. It's going to turn it off and set the threshold range and everything right back.
So that's your escape key.
It is, yeah. And this is what I said about, like, one of the things that's great on a digital console is you have the ability to save things. So, you know, today and tomorrow as we build a mix and as I mix church tomorrow, we can save that and throw it, you know, we can save a scene, we can save the whole thing off to a thumb drive, like I said, and have the full thing backed up. One of the nice things is it's really hard to break it so hard that you can't get it back. But I like to discourage people from becoming recall monkeys and just like always recalling back to a particular scene to do things, because I want you to learn the tools. The reason I've become good at what I do is every time I sit down at a console, I like to go nearly zero the thing out and start over. A lot of that's because I know how I like to do things versus how somebody else likes to do things. So if I'm not the person who sat there last, even if I'm the person who sat there last, there's a lot of things that I'm going to start over and reinvent every single time I sit down, because it makes me a better engineer, because I'm not relying on the work that I did 2 months ago to make that kick drum sound good. I'm making that kick drum sound good every single day. Then I'm learning how to manipulate those tools to make it perfect. Too many people walk into church and they push faders and they're like, great, that's my thing. I push the faders and that's mixing. Mixing is so much more than just volume. And so I always like to just say, scenes and things like that are great to have like a fail-safe and like an, oh crap, what did I do? How do I get back to something that I know works? Great. I have the ability to do that. That's awesome. But I just want to make sure you guys are taking these tools and actually going and playing with them and like making a signal sound good from scratch, because there's a lot more sense of accomplishment that comes from like going and turning all the knobs to make the signal sound good, starting from it just being flat. And sometimes you realize that you've been over processing or over compressing or over gating or whatever that thing is. Sometimes just listening to this channel flat makes you realize it sounds better flat than it did however I had it last week. Like, sometimes you realize like I was too aggressive last time, and it's better to just kind of take a step back and listen to it and say, yeah, here's what I need to do on that channel. I need to go just take a little bit of this out or add a little bit of this.